Hello and welcome to Comic Book Art ASMR, and we're going to be going through different pieces of comic work that I've worked on and discuss them, and I'll tell you how I did it, and maybe you'll just zone out and listen to the sound of my voice, or you'll pick something up in art. So right now this is a figure study that I was doing on perspective and the male torso. I did it based off a picture, and what I see that's going on right there is I am using the pencil layer to just create a basic frame, and then adding in details once I'm secure with everything and where it's going. You'll see now that I'm adding in a lot of shade. I actually did that on a layer above that, so that way if I wanted to change something, I didn't mess up the frame that I'd already set up. Shadow is something that I'm working a lot harder on, trying to understand, because in digital painting it really can give you a sense of depth. Now at the top here I've done a light ink layer, and it's in red. And the reason I'm doing that is that this piece is inspired by an artist who's known on Instagram and Tumblr as Silverjow. You should really check him out. He does some really amazing work. And then over that, in a new layer, I'm doing a lighter red, and it's in full opacity, so it's very rich. But what I'll do in a moment is go through and make the opacity lighter so you can see through it, and soften the edges using a blur filter, so that way it looks more like shadow. I'm putting the eyes in there, and see, I did that there. I took out the pencils, now adding in the highlights, which really give it a sense of roundness and depth. Some extra shadow there, just to give everything a little darkness, and then little clouds in the background, and there we go. That's my male body torso perspective. Now here is something fun, Atreyu Falcor, that you probably recognize from The Neverending Story. I admit, on Netflix I've been watching a lot of Stranger Things, and that has made me very nostalgic for 80s retro stuff, and I immediately thought of one of my favorite moments in The Neverending Story when Atreyu was riding Falcor. So you can see that I'm doing the base here. Now what's fun about this pencil layer is you can see a couple times where I changed my mind. Drew the orange there that is around his neck, and I thought, well, he's Native American, maybe he'd have a tattoo of some sort. So I drew a tattoo, but I ended up not liking it. So you'll see it change a couple times in a moment. There it is. And I wasn't happy with it, nor the fringe on his pant leg. So I went through and I changed it to the purple buffalo, which is far more appropriate if you know Neverending Story, since Atreyu hunts the purple buffalo with his people. Now, something that my friends have noticed is Atreyu is rather well built, well defined in this picture, and so my idea of Atreyu is not a little kid, but actually a young gentleman. So that's why he is a little more filled out. You can see the ink layer is coming in there, and I'm just nuancing. Sometimes you see me adjust spatially a chest or a leg just because the perspective isn't right, or at least in my opinion it's not right. You see on the left there that I had the ties for his arm wrappings, but I didn't like those, so I moved them over, as you can see there. I actually had to look up the orange to make sure I got the snakes right on it. We cut out the pencil and we start doing color. Now you see that I switched the background to blue, and the reason I did that is because blue was a color I knew I wasn't going to be using very much, but things like white I would be using, and it's hard to color white on white. So that allows me to see what color I'm doing, and then if I have to do the color that's the same or similar to the background, I'll just change the background to another color. So I color in a base blocks, as you can see here, with no particular shading, just plain color like you would if you were coloring a coloring book. A lot of people asked me why I started out having Falcor just gray, because Falcor's very white. And just like with shadow, you have to build with a base color, so there'll be some darker fur underneath and then lighter fur on top of that, but I have to start somewhere in the middle, and so that's what happens there. Now you can see I'm adding in his base fur with a pen stroke that's actually called hair. And so you do a dark layer there. As you can see, I'm just finishing up the tail. And then you do a white on top of that. It was really fun to do this because I really got to play around. Now, if you're wondering how I did this, this is a program called Procreate, which is available on the iPad Pro, and this is all being done on an iPad Pro, including the video itself. And it records every stroke I do, so then I can play it back for you as a movie, which is really neat. And I found a lot of people really like to look over my shoulder when I'm drawing, especially if I'm drawing on a tablet. They just love to see how it comes together. So I started making these videos, been really doing like quick fast forward, but I also have ASMR, and a lot of people seem to like watching things come together. So I thought maybe we could combine the two. So I slowed the videos down so that way they look good, and you guys can see what it takes to put the art together. So what's really cool with this stroke is adding texture. But what you can do once you do that, because that's fairly rough as you see it is in a moment, I will blur, or I will fuzz out the white and the dark gray, and it'll look more like fur. You can see down there my Tumblr address if you want to check that out. I do a lot of superheroes and observations on comic books and funny things like that. So if you have affinity for that, check it out. Just doing a little texturing. You can see the texturing on the tongue. That's a light opacity brush that allows me to do that. And now we're adding in all the shadow, because you want Falcor to have definite proportion, but you still want him to seem fluffy. So I definitely used a soft, light opacity airbrush, and then you saw I blurred it out there. And then we're getting the shading on Atreyu, which is done roughly, and then I go through and again I soften the blur on that, and it makes it look more like shadow. And we add in our highlights, as you can see I'm doing there. Atreyu's been to the gym in Fantasia quite clearly. So then, yeah, what else do we have going on? What happens there? With this one, you saw I pulled in a background really early on. I find that inspires me. Oh, and I almost forgot the purple buffalo there. You can see that. And then I just went back and redid the background, making it a little more vibrant, and adding some shadow so it looks like the luck dragon is just glowing. Okay, last here we have our POKÉMON, because that's really popular right now. This is actually the first movie I made of my art on this new program, on the Procreate program. And it was fun to see everything come together as I was drawing it. I would stop and replay what I was doing just because I wanted to see where it would go. You can also see in this one where I make a couple mistakes and go back and correct those. It's fun drawing things like Bulbasaur or Pikachu, because I need to look and see what they look like, and I can't just draw it because it's in my brain. I'm not that well versed in Pokemon. But my friends who say, well, how can you draw those guys? And I say, things are made up of basic shapes, and if you can master those shapes, then you can usually manage it. You notice here I had a hard time with the face. I couldn't come up with a look I liked until I finally worked it out and came up with a sort of sarcastic and cocky kind of look. It's fun. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll draw the base of the person, and then I'll do the clothes as a separate layer. and other characters. So that way if I don't like something, but I like the pose, I can just redraw it and combine layers layer if I choose to. We're going in here, inking layer. So that's fun. I enjoyed the hoodies that they're wearing in the game, so I thought I would do a variation on that. And the socks and the shoes. You may have noticed I have a propensity for athletic gentlemen. They're fun to draw. If I'm going to do figure study, I might as well have a good time, and I'm a big nerd, so that's where that comes from. I thought they were always talking about training the Pokemon, but, the trainers need a little exercise too. If you noticed up on his right shoulder, I put a tattoo up there for Instinct. Yes, I am Instinct, so hopefully that doesn't make you upset or turn you away from this video. We can all play Pokemon together. Adding the base color, and you'll notice that I'll usually stick with one color and color everything that's going to have that color, although sometimes I'll forget a piece. Thankfully, with a tablet I can just indicate the color I want back, and then it'll come back. So in coloring here, you notice I'm doing it against white, but then I realized I was going to have to use some white, so I changed the color background to something I didn't think I was going to use, like pink, except I messed up the hat. You'll see it blink out. There it goes. Good old Squirtle there. I'm tempted to start using shading in like 1 or 2 layers. I tend to blend it a lot, but you don't have to. So make it look more like animation. Now you can see the rough of that shading. Even that rough, I think it really starts to add a depth, and it'll get smoothed out there. Adding highlight. So his abs are going to pop. They really pop. There you go. It's funny to get so dark and so light. I put it together as a skin tone. We have a Pikachu looking very dour there. And everybody in clothes get the highlight. And then if I don't need a layer anymore, I either merge it or I just delete it like the pencil layer. Although sometimes people like to see that. And some finishing detail there. And then I thought I'd just throw them in a gem of some sort, but make it look like it was spotlighted. So that's an actual photo in the back. I wasn't quite happy with it, so I changed the dimensions a little bit, and you'll see that. So thank you very much. If you like this video, let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you soon.